When Lizzie and I were 18, we planned our first vacation together, traveling alone to London. We checked into the London Marriott Hotel, and the first thing we did was drop off our luggage. Since we were staying for an entire week, we needed to figure out our schedule. It was already getting late, so we didn't have much time to explore, but we still wanted to see something iconic. We decided to visit Big Ben, the famous clock tower that's synonymous with London. Afterward, we grabbed dinner at a nearby spot called Street Stephen's Tavern. It was a little pricey, but thankfully our dads were footing the bill, so we didn't have to worry about the cost. By the time we left the tavern, it was around 9:00 p.m., and we were eager to experience London's nightlife. We agreed that we'd first need to head back to the hotel to shower and change. As we were walking, a young, attractive man overheard us talking about the bars nearby that we were looking up on our phones. He stopped us and struck up a conversation. There was something immediately charming about him that grabbed both Lizzie and me, and we ended up being more receptive than we probably should have been when he told us about a big party one of his rich friends was hosting that night. He said that two attractive girls like us would fit right in. Lizzie and I exchanged looks and laughed, but we agreed to go. The man told us the party wouldn't start until 11:00, then asked for my number. I gave it to him, and he said he'd text me the details and see us later before walking off down the street. Lizzie and I were both excited. It was only our first night in London, and we were already invited to a wild party. We figured if we played our cards right with the wealthy crowd there, we'd have some good connections for the rest of the trip. Back at the hotel, we showered and changed, then pre-gamed with a bit of vodka to loosen up. Looking back, we definitely drank more than we should have. After a while, I realized we hadn't even gotten the guy's name, so I texted him. He quickly replied with the address for the apartment party, and we eagerly left the hotel to catch an Uber. The ride to the apartment was about 15 minutes, and when we arrived, we couldn't believe how different the building looked from anything we were used to back home in the US. I entered the building code, and we were buzzed in right away. We took the elevator up to the 5th floor, both of us nervous but excited. As we approached the apartment, the alcohol helped to calm our nerves a little, but I could still feel a sense of unease. I knocked on the door, but we didn't hear any music inside, which struck me as odd. We started to wonder if we had the wrong place, but the young man from earlier opened the door, greeting us warmly and welcoming us inside. As he shut the door behind us, we asked where everyone else was, and he casually said it was still early, not to worry. We looked around the apartment, and it was definitely not as big as we had expected for a place belonging to a rich guy. We asked about his friend, the one who owned the apartment, and he said that the friend was getting things ready in his room. He invited us to sit down and make ourselves comfortable. I checked the time on my phone. It was about 11:30. Lizzie and I sat down on the couch, and I could see on her face that she was as uncomfortable as I was. The man sat down next to me on the couch, far too close for comfort. Just then, another man came out of a room. He didn't say anything, didn't smile, just stared at us for a moment before walking to the door of the apartment and standing there silently. The man next to me started asking us questions, like where we were from, and if we were traveling alone. I started feeling sick to my stomach. The man who had been sitting with us got up and went to the kitchen to get drinks. The other man just stood by the door, making me feel even more trapped. Lizzie was seated to the left of me, more hidden from view, so I whispered to her to dial 911. She did so and began tapping on the phone repeatedly, signaling to the operator that we needed help. Lizzie suddenly called out loudly to the man in the kitchen, asking if this was apartment 5C. The man by the door answered, confirming it in a cold, unfriendly voice. I whispered to Lizzie again, urging her to stall as long as possible and not to drink any of the drinks the man had brought us. As I was speaking to Lizzie, the man standing by the door called out to the other man in the kitchen to hurry up with the drinks, and soon he returned with them. I had to think quickly to buy time before we were forced to drink whatever was in front of us. I came up with a silly idea and suggested we play a game of Would You Rather. It felt juvenile, but I needed something to distract them. The man seemed to play along, and Lizzie and I started coming up with questions. He began coming up with some of his own, but kept suggesting we take a sip of our drinks, saying that the guests would be arriving soon and we needed to loosen up. I stalled as much as I could, saying we'd already had a lot to drink, but might have more later. But then, just when things started to feel like they were going downhill, the two men exchanged looks. The larger, more intimidating man by the door came over and insisted we drink the drinks. He was about to shove one of the glasses in my face when there was a sudden loud banging at the door, followed by a voice shouting, "Police." The younger man looked at us and asked, "Did you call the police?" I denied it, but my voice cracked, revealing my nervousness. Lizzie, apparently fed up with the situation, screamed, "Help." The police tried to kick the door down, and the larger man immediately threw his hands up in surrender and opened the door. The two men tried to play innocent, but Lizzie and I stuck to our story. We told the police that they had forced us into the apartment and wouldn't let us leave, and that we were pretty sure they had drugged our drinks. That was enough to get them arrested. Another squad car arrived, and Lizzie and I were escorted to the police station for further questioning. Our drinks were tested, and to no surprise, they were found to be laced with roofies. Though this was an incredibly disturbing and traumatic experience, we didn't let it ruin our trip to London. In fact, we never told our parents about what happened until years later, because we knew they'd likely be far less likely to let us travel again. Looking back, we realized that the alcohol had clouded our judgment that night, but the most important lesson we learned was to never trust strangers, no matter how charming or attractive they seem.